Welcome back to the On Adventure podcast. I'm Josh Self and I'll be your host today. Today I'm joined by someone who proves that age is only a number when it comes to endurance and grit. Bob Becker recently became the oldest person ever to finish the legendary Badwater 135. This is a 135-mile race through Death Valley, starting 282 feet below sea level and then climbing to over 8,000 feet at Mount Whitney. At 80 years old, Bob crossed the finish line after 45 hours on the course, supported by an all-star crew and powered by decades of curiosity and determination. In our conversation, we dive into how he discovered running in his 50s, the moment ultras hooked him for good, and what keeps him chasing challenges most of us can't imagine. It's a story about resilience and purpose and finding adventure at every stage of life. Let's jump in. Bob Becker, welcome to the On Adventure podcast. This has been a conversation I have been looking forward to having since we first got connected a few weeks ago, and a lot to get through today. A lot based on what you just recently accomplished, and also reading through your bio of things that you've spent your time doing in the last really couple decades. I think there's endless information for us to go over today. But first of all, thanks for being here with me.
It's a pleasure, Josh. Very, very glad to be with you and your audience.
Well, I think for most of the people that are listening, your name has been in the news lately that they would be aware of for finishing Badwater yet again. And I'm sure we'll spend plenty of time talking about that. But let's back up a little bit. And from what I've read about you really did not start running seriously until your 60s. And I should say, if you don't mind saying how old you are right now.
I'm all of 80 years old.
80 years old.
Yeah, hit the big 80. Approaching middle age now.
Yeah, I like that. I like that mentality. And we joke about it, but really after we get done talking today and people hear what you're spending your time doing, that may be very well true. You're doing a lot more at 80 that people are doing in their 40s and 50s. But is that true that you really didn't start running seriously until your 60s?
Yeah, I ran the mile in high school. I played sports all my adult life, and I went to the gym and ran a little bit to stay in shape, but I wasn't really racing at all, and certainly not running long. And actually, it was I moved to Florida from the Midwest in 2001, and early the next year, I got a call from some friends in Minneapolis who said they were going to run a marathon. So my running life started as a result of that call, when I thought, okay, I will come up and join you guys, and sounds like an excuse to have a beer with my buddies. So I went out and literally bought a pair of running shoes and asked the people in the store, what do I do now? And they put me in touch with a marathon training group. And so I went up to Grandma's marathon in June. That was, I was 57 at the time. And that was going to be at a one and done, but I actually qualified for Boston. So I said, well, got to do that. So yeah, I wound up running weekly with a group of friends here in Fort Lauderdale. And in 2004, one of them asked me if I'd ever heard of the Marathon des Sables. He said it was an ultramarathon. My response was, what's an ultramarathon? So as recently as 21 years ago, I had no idea what an ultra was. And I think I was in a lot of good company, I think, at that time. Yeah. So I checked it out. And the next week I came back, and the next Marathon des Sables, MDS, was going to be in April of 2005. When I was turning 60 and my buddy Jared was turning 40, and I said, hey, why don't we give ourselves a big 0 at the end of our birthday? Let's give ourselves a present. So we did wind up going out to Marathon des Sables, training for the race and running that, which is, you may know, is a 150 to 160 mile stage race in the Sahara Desert in Morocco. And That was my first ultra. I was starstruck, absolutely fell in love with the whole thing. And that's how it all began. Yes.
Well, I mean, even that timeline tells me a lot about who you are, to go from, I'm kind of in shape, to I'm going to run a marathon. I ran the marathon and qualified for Boston, which most people do not do. And then you do that, and it's not like, well, maybe I'll run a little bit further. It's let's go run 150 miles through the Sahara. So that tells me that you're not really, challenges don't scare you away. I mean, these would be huge feats for anybody to accomplish, but your comment there at the end of that it really captured you, these long distances really captured you. What is it about, what do you think it is about these distances that really caught your interest early on?
Well, I found that the sport of ultra running is a very special community, and
Mm.
the thing that most struck me about Marathon des Sables, in addition to the fact that I never would have traveled to such a place if it hadn't been for this opportunity to run a race, and then the spectacular beauty of the desert and all that. But the biggie was the camaraderie that was so very evident during that race, that while almost by definition we're all competitive A-type personalities doing this stuff,
Right.
you're still out there in those long distance environments, very willing to help each other if anybody's having a problem. You run out of water, or whatever the issue might be. And I can certainly tell you some stories, but it was that aspect in particular that drew me to the sport. I've always been very competitive from a very, very early age, and always been curious about what's next. And, even to this day, I don't know it all. If you keep an open mind, there's plenty of growth ahead, and who knows what's over that next horizon, around that next curve. So in many, many cases, these races that I've done have appealed to me because of the fact that they're unique, or in a very interesting place where I might not ever have gone. The challenge itself becomes just really attractive. And my thinking is, generally, if somebody else can do it within reason, why can't I? So yeah, within reason. We can talk about how I choose races realistically, but basically that's it. I've just always been very competitive and curious.
Is there any race you looked at and go, no, that's out of reach?
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example. I live in Fort Lauderdale, which is dead flat. The biggest hill we have here is a bridge that's 75 feet above sea level at the top. So it would be very unrealistic for me to attempt to run hard rock, right?
Yeah.
So, which for those who may not know is 10 to 14,000 feet in very technical terrain out in Colorado. There'd be just no way I could prepare for that. So, besides which, at this point in my life, I used to bomb downhills and trails, but I'm not willing to do that anymore and break my neck. So yeah, that's an extreme example of a race that would make absolutely no sense whatsoever to me, as curious as it might otherwise be.
Now, but Badwater, I guess it's more of a gradual ascent from Death Valley? Because that has some elevation gain to it, does it not?
Yeah, no, it has a lot. It has basically two 5,000-foot climbs and an 8,000-foot climb, and that's just as an overview. So there's a lot of climbing, but first of all, it's a race that's run on the road, not on trails. So you don't have the technical aspects of roots and rocks and and so on. And yeah, especially the last, well, all three of them are steep, but the last climb up Mount Whitney, the last 13 miles to the finish line, is really challenging, very, very steep, a lot of switchbacks, but it's something that I can more or less prepare to do here. Hard rock, the altitude is also an issue. Badwater, you finish at the Mount Whitney portal at 8,500 feet. I don't have an altitude problem at 8,500 feet. So
Gotcha.
The issue is simply, how can I simulate climbing hill work when I live in a flat environment? Again, we can talk about some of those techniques, but that's reasonably doable, where something like a hard rock type trail race wouldn't be.
Yeah. So, I think some people would be interested in your thoughts around training techniques in a flat area to prepare for something that's not flat. So what ideas or things do you implement to prepare for something like that?
Well, I'll give all credit to my long-term coach and mentor, Lisa Smith-Batchen, who has always had me ready on race day. And it's Lisa's techniques, for the most part, that I'll be talking about. And by the way, it's also Lisa who has me doing race-specific training and age-specific training, so I don't get injured, because she doesn't have me overtrain. And it's not all just about long mileage. So some of the things I do are the obvious things. So I'll go to the gym and use a Stairmaster. If I can find an office building or an apartment building that has a lot of steps that I can get access to, which is decreasingly possible because everybody's concerned about liability.
Yeah.
But when I can do that, that's very, very helpful. I mentioned that 75-foot bridge before. That's the 17th Street Causeway, and it's a half a mile across, so it's a quarter mile up and a quarter mile down, basically. I'll do repeats on that bridge sometimes to the point of being brain dead. Like, I've done as many as 25 miles on that bridge. So
Oh my
you're out there
gosh.
for a long time. So, thank God for audiobooks, by the way. But anyway, back and forth on the bridge is really important. And one of the things that she taught me to do was actually pull a tire. Again, it's not unique, but it's something that's been very helpful. So you take it like an SUV tire and you attach a rope to one end and the other end around your waist. And as you pull that tire, it creates a lot of drag. So it works the back of your legs and in effect simulates uphill running. So those are the majority of things. But and you get in a treadmill and put it at an angle and build it up. So there are all of those things, none of which are the same as finding a mountain that you can go climb, but they all help.
Yeah. How far are you running with that tire? Is this shorter kind of sprint type distances, or are you really dragging it for a while?
Usually it's 4 to 5 miles, but depending, most of the time it's walking or it's a mix of walking with some running. I'm generally not running the whole time. I used to actually pull that tire up that causeway, up that bridge. But over the years, there's so many people out there running and walking that I'd be in the way. So I generally don't do that anymore. But, if you're in a place where you can actually combine a hill with the space to drag a tire, that would be ideal.
Have you ever had any, I'm picturing you pulling a tire over a 75-foot bridge. Has anyone ever stopped and said, "Sir, what are you doing?"
Yeah, more than once. Yeah, the jokes have been some of them have been pretty original and pretty funny. Yeah, they're always, you're being followed by a tire, and I mean, all that crazy stuff. Yeah, no, most people, at least the first time they see me, have some kind of reaction and usually decide they got to say something. They have to say something. So it gets to be pretty funny.
Well, that's super helpful. And actually, that whole list you just went through seems like there's plenty of hill work that you can do even in a flatland area. So that's really, really interesting. Let me go back to the kind of as you got into these races and into these longer distances, was there any point where you realized that it was where it became clear that this was going to be part of your lifestyle, part of the things that Bob just did? Was there any point where it felt like it flipped into that kind of experience?
Yes, in a couple of probably two parts to that answer. So when I did Marathon des Sables, I wound up actually fracturing my femur during that race, and afterwards I had surgery to put my leg back together again.
Was it from a fall or just like stress fracture?
There was no specific trauma. The only thing I could think of is at that time I may have overtrained and gone into the race with a stress fracture, but I don't know. But in that race, you carry all your food and clothing and gear, whatever you need for the 7 days of the race. Each day is a stage. So you go from point A to point B, you sleep, and then you do the same thing again the next day, point B to point C, and so on. But you're carrying everything you need for that week on your back, with the exception of water. You just couldn't carry the weight. So the race provides water, and the race provides a tent. There's basically old coffee sacks tied together with sticks holding it up, and 10 of you and 9 of your best new friends all sleep packed together in this tent.
Oh,
that's what they provide, and that's also one of the reasons you get to know each other pretty well. But yeah, so we never figured out what caused it, but I started running. Eventually, it was walking, and eventually it was hobbling, and so it took me a while to recover from that surgery. And the following year, I found I had prostate cancer, so I had that surgery done.
Gosh.
And, it took a while. But when I started getting back to it, my actual first 100-miler was in 2007 in February, Rocky Raccoon. And so I was 62 at the time, loved the race, and had an experience in that race that also reinforced my sense of how special ultra marathons were. And this is my literal shirt off the back story. So that race is 25-mile loops. And I remember and it's in Huntsville, Texas. It's in February, and it gets really cold at night. And I wasn't prepared for it at all. After the third loop, I came into that finish line area to kind of regroup to go out for the last loop. And I was like freezing. I mean, my bones were banging together. It was pretty awful. And another runner came in right behind me who was layered up, and he literally took his shirt off and handed it to me so that I could warm up a little bit because I didn't have any other clothes.
Wow.
And that gesture reinforced my feeling about running. And so that was all important. I thought, wow, this is pretty special stuff. And so I went home from that race and with some friends thought, there are no ultras in South Florida. There aren't that many in Florida. There are others, but nothing in South Florida where we are. And we decided to try to run the Florida Keys to see if that might be viable for a race.
Okay.
It's 100 miles from Key Largo to Key West across 42 islands. And so we went out there one day in April, 5 of us, with 7 people supporting us, and did that run. I thought, yeah, this might work. So in 2008, in May, Keys 100 was born. We started this race. I was the first race director. I had no idea what I was doing, but we figured it out. And the race has grown, and next May will be our 18th year. And I mentioned this background because it's part of the answer to your question, that I became more and more enamored with the whole idea of ultramarathon running, and now bringing other people into the fold and creating an opportunity for people down in my neck of the woods to experience the same thing I've experienced. And so as a sort of a combination of what became my job, my hobby, and my sport, it all came together, and it has been almost 20 years now, and I couldn't be happier. It's just been a phenomenal ride.
How many people will do that race this year?
We'll typically have 900 or so most years.
Yeah. From 0 to 900. That,
Yeah.
That is.
Well, it's been in that range for a number of years now, and it's pretty cool.
And do you still do it in? Did you say February?
No, it's Keys 100's in May.
In May.
And
okay.
we did that intentionally. It's very, very hot, so that the 2 challengers are the distance, obviously, but because it's pretty flat except for a couple of bridges, we decided that let's add the heat as a factor, and it is. It's a tough race, much harder than it looks like on paper. And when we started it, the quote unquote tourist season used to pretty much be over at the end of April. So by May, there wasn't as much traffic. Hotels weren't as expensive. So, it all kind of fit. But for the last, really since COVID, there is no season. I mean, the Keys are busy year round, and hotels are, expensive, and it's just the way it is. But yeah, we kept the date. So it's the 3rd Saturday in May every year.
May. Gotcha. So, I mean, that's pretty clear when not only did ultra get in your blood to do these things, but it really became part of a career. Now, what was your career before being a race director?
Yeah, I've been in mortgage banking for a long, long time, mostly residential, but I was doing little commercial stuff down here. And, this all happened around the time of the real estate crisis in 2007, 2008, 2009. And without going in a lot of detail, I had my world fell apart, that world. And the timing for doing something brand new and totally different was there in my lap. And, my wife, who's my greatest supporter, I said to her, I'd like to do this if we can do it full time, and took a vow of poverty. And here I am, a race director, So, this ain't the Boston Marathon, man. This is, but it's a labor of love. And the beauty is, over all these years, I've brought so many new people into the sport, and which is very, very gratifying. So still at it. We'll see how long I can keep at it. I hope for a while, Josh.
I've seen that a lot with folks that have, regardless of what the adventure is, that it kind of has this progression of, okay, I did this thing, then this thing is really part of my DNA now. And then I become an evangelist for that thing. And it's great because it's not just somebody. I mean, you've seen what all the people that you've seen get into these ultras. You've seen the way that I've seen it as well with folks that I know that have done it. The distances, the events, the camaraderie that you pointed out is so unique and so different than a lot of other places that we exist in our normal life. It's really pretty special. And so you get to paint on a canvas of races and being a race director, where other people are painting on other types of canvases, but it's getting people to really, experience their great life right now. And so, yeah, say more about that.
Yeah, I absolutely. And I went on to create a number of other races, another number of other ultras that we've done. But I do want to go back to Keys for a second, because one of the things that we've done over the years is we added a 50-mile. So it's a 100-mile race, but it also offers a 50-mile race and a 50-kilometer race and a relay race, actually two of them. So, but a 100-mile relay with up to 6 people on a team. And what that attracts usually is people who've done half marathons or marathons. And the fun of the relay itself speaks for itself. They're a blast to do. But it also gives these folks a chance to participate in an ultra without having to run the whole distance themselves, right? And what happens is they're running alongside other ultra runners, and they get to talk to them and say, wow, if that person can do it, maybe I could too. And it sort of creates the next generation of ultramarathon runners. And I've seen that, over and over again. Cool. So that's been really great. And again, today I actually direct 2 races, Keys 100 and then another race called Daytona 100, which is another ocean road race. That one point to point, 100-mile from Jacksonville Beach down to south of Daytona Beach. But before we were on, I happened to be mentioning Ken Posner, who you interviewed very recently. And I met Ken in around 2011, 2012, and he introduced me to the largest state park in Florida, which is part of the Everglades, actually. And long story short, I wound up creating a race out there running on trails through the jungle, through the Everglades, which was spectacular and a totally unique experience. And until COVID, when it ended, it was 9 years out there. We'd go out literally every year with machetes to reopen the trails that had grown over. It was so much fun. It was just great. So the point being that creating these things has been part of the fun, and everyone's a little different. No 2 trail races, no 2 road races are alike. So that for me is part of the fun of both creating them and then giving other people the opportunity to experience the race as well.
That's very cool. You mentioned Ken. So for anybody that hasn't listened to Ken's interview, go back, and particularly the parts he talked a lot about his chasing the grid effort, and a lot of it's barefoot, a lot of it is off trail where he is bushwhacking through areas to get to summits. And so I don't know if he brought that, the machete and that kind of effort down to Florida with you, but talk to me a little bit more about what that experience is like going through a jungle. I can relate to mountains. I can relate to bigger outdoor areas like that. Personally, I don't like heat. So I like cold. I can, really, really cold is I'm living my best life at that point. So hot and humid, which Florida has an expertise in, that's my body is like, it's going to take us a little time to get used to that. So what is it like going through a jungle type environment to do one of these races? Are they single track, like I would imagine, through a mountain or hilly region, or does it look something different going through a place like the Everglades?
Yeah, I'll be glad to describe it. By the way, the Iditarod 1000 is waiting for you, Josh. So
I interviewed a guy named Pete Ripmaster about a year ago who won it a couple years ago. Yeah. And what he described with -40 temperatures, I'm like, yeah, I could do that.
He's remarkable on that whole series of races. It is a series. It's pretty crazy. My buddy Grant Mon has done it too, and it takes a special person. No, thank you. See, there's another example. No, not for me. So this race was done in it's called the Fakahatchee Strand Preserve. It's a state park, as I said, and it's dead flat. There are no hills or mountains. I don't want you to think of something in Brazil, for example. And it's a park that includes this jungly area and also wide open prairies, very, very different environments. And the routes that we carved out were designed so everybody could experience all of these different kinds of environments there. And in the Everglades, a couple of feet of elevation change also changes the vegetation and what you see out there. Very, very different. Okay. So there is a dirt road through the park, kind of splits the park, which is part of the route. Big open field near the entrance area, which serves as a great start and finish line area and a place to have a cookout, and people would tent camp the night before and so on. And then when you get up this road to a certain point, there are a number of trails going off, which most of which had grown over the years. Back in the 40s and 50s, this was a place that was heavily logged for the cypress trees that grow there, which were used in the construction of, among other things, PT boats back in World War II. So the cypress logs were very valuable. So the logging people would come in, literally take like a steam shovel kind of thing and dig a trench and pile the dirt from the trench up in the middle to create basically a raised area on which they would put railroad tracks, a narrow gauge railroad, which is how they got the logs out of there. So what remained behind many years later were these raised trails that they called trams, and we would use those to race through those swampy, jungly areas. And nobody has a death wish here. The first issue is always safety. So this is not a race where you bushwhack, where you have to create your own trail, because there are animals out there. You will see gators, you might see snakes, and there are other wild animals out there as well, which is also a reason we didn't have a 100-miler, because we didn't want people out there overnight. So 50 miles was as long as it got. So we would create these trails create these running trails using these pre-existing trams, but have to clear many of them, some of which had been kind of grown over for a long time. And each year they'd go back enough where we'd have to go back and re-clear them. And so you'd go through this area, you'd wind up unless you were really competitive, stopping along the way at some gator ponds to check out all the alligators.
No thanks.
They don't, there's plenty to eat out there. They don't bother you unless you jump on them or something, come too close to them. But yeah, and then you would go out into the prairie area, it's kind of spectacular. You're in this jungly area, and all of a sudden it opens up into this wide open, big sky prairie, and we'd run through those as well. Anyway, it's a very, very, very interesting, kind of exciting place, and everyone loved it. And the last year was 2020, and here we are 5 years later, and I get emails all the time from people saying, "When are you going to start Everglades up again?" And well, it's not my call. The park doesn't want outside events anymore, so we can't do it. But
is that right? So after COVID, the park said no more?
Yeah, they had a different change of management, a change of attitude, and so they decided no more outside events. But we had a great 9-year run, and it was a lot of fun to do. So it was a long-winded answer, but a very, very unique experience, no question about it.
What is the strangest animal encounter that you had anybody experience in any of those races?
Well, other than on rare occasions seeing the endangered Florida panther out there, which would immediately go the other way. They don't want to have anything to do with you. As I think I explained, we would be out there a month or two or so before the race, clearing and re-clearing trails. And I was out with a group one day and kind of got ahead of the group on this one trail. And maybe 35, 40 feet in front of me, a bear came out of the woods, crossing the trail. And it looked at me and I looked at it, and we both headed back in the direction we'd come in. Fortunately, it didn't have a cub with it and, get aggressive. But yeah, for me personally, that was the weirdest one.
Wow. Well, so you mentioned your wife a few minutes ago, and in very supportive terms, being your biggest supporter. As you got into doing these, what I know about these types of adventures that people go on is they take time. Like, you don't just generally get up off the couch and go do a marathon through the desert or something extreme. So if you would tell me what it was like and maybe a little more about your family, if you don't mind, but what it was like trying to train for these types of things and put the time and energy and effort into it with other personal responsibilities.
Well, my wife, Suzanne, as I said before, is the greatest supporter I could ever have. When it comes to the races themselves, typically she doesn't want to be there. It's just not her thing at all. It's what I do. She does other things. So we have our life together, and we have the things that each of us does. And we respect the time that it takes to dedicate ourselves to those things. I do most of my training early in the morning, not all of it certainly, but my long stuff typically on a weekend. And I do it at a time and in a way and on days that aren't going to interfere with the things we're doing together. That has never really been a huge problem. We've been able to work through that. And while she doesn't typically want to be at races, I'll give you an idea of the kind of support she provides, not only me personally as a runner, giving me the space and just the blessing to go do it, and always saying, hey, try not to kill yourself, come back in one piece, but for my races. So for those races where we have aid stations and have had them over the years, any of the home cooked food out there or baked banana bread and things like that, Suzanne does all that. She prepares, she cooks it all, potatoes, wow, and everything else. She couldn't be more supportive. She just doesn't want to be there. But it's our life, and it has been now for, well, this will be the Keys, the 18th year of Keys 100. That was my first. So it's been 18 years now, almost. And we've adjusted to it, and it works for us very, very well. I have 3 kids, by the way. They're all very grown. One grown grandchild who graduated from college last year, none of whom are runners. All of them appreciate what I do, but none of them have ever been runners. So it's just the nature of the beast. I have a nephew, my sister's son, who's an Olympian, and as his wife is, but my direct descendants are not runners. It's it's what I do, not what they do.
What sport is your nephew an Olympian?
You'll probably know them, Kara and Adam Gasser. They're both runners.
Oh, yes.
Adam ran the 5K at the Sydney Olympics, and Kara's run 5K, 10K, and the marathon, and she's a broadcaster for NBC now. So, yeah, they're runners. They have that same running gene.
Yeah, it's somewhere floating around in there.
Yeah, it is.
Have any of your kids or grandkids found their own types of adventures? Maybe not running, but doing something else.
Yeah, more my granddaughter. I almost skipped a generation. My middle daughter jogs with the dog when she's out taking it for a walk, but not really so much otherwise. She rode horses as a kid. My granddaughter has gotten into not only skiing, but also sailing. So, and we actually did a short adventure race together a couple of years ago, just to have something we could do together, because she's in Colorado and I'm in Florida. So we don't get to see each other very often. So that was a lot of fun, but that was a one-off.
Where was that?
That was in Wyoming, actually.
Oh, wow.
And it was kind of the novice level introductory 3-hour adventure race to combine running and biking. And there was a boating component that we actually didn't get to, but it was a lot of fun. Really was. It was a great bonding experience. And I would do more of those with her if we could figure out the time.
Well, and I think that's also cool that you've been able to, as you've aged, not only stay healthy, but stay fit, stay active, flexible, able to go do those things with your grandkids, potentially your great grandkids, depending on how things continue for you. I think all of us would want that. It's not just living a long time, but having the health span to match the lifespan to be able to experience those things with our grandkids or even great grandkids. So that's a really cool story.
Well, you're absolutely right. And it doesn't have to be ultramarathon running or marathon running. It doesn't have to be running at all. Although the idea of even walking a 5K with your grandkid or great grandkid, why not? Something to think about. But, I'm one of the many reasons that I continue to do these things is because I'm told pretty frequently that I've inspired someone's mother or grandmother to get off the couch and start moving.
Oh, that's cool.
And that's so important to me. I mean, the health aspect. Sometimes I talk about the dietary aspect as well, but just the notion of moving, and whether it's walking or riding a bike or swimming or going out in the backyard and starting a garden, the movement, the physical activity is really important. And it enables you, if you keep at it, keep doing something, keep moving, to have that adventure with your grandkid. It really does. So it pays off.
Talk to me a little bit about your nutrition. Anybody that has done anything really longer than an hour or two knows that you have to have the nutrition dialed in. Otherwise, you're just not going to finish. So what does nutrition look like for you in everyday life? And then how do you do things on race day?
About 3 years ago, my cardiologist said, you really ought to think about changing your diet because you do have a little bit of blockage and a little bit of, concern about your cholesterol. And so I actually became a vegan 3 years ago. And my wife and I just flipped a switch and realized that we believed in the science of it. We did our research and so we did that. So, it's tough sometimes when I'm on the road, I have to cheat a little bit. But for the most part, stick pretty close to that, certainly at home. During races, what you just said is vitally important. You can't do 100 miles or 50 miles without a proper balance of nutrition, hydration, electrolyte replacement, especially. And in a case like Badwater, somehow managing the heat, staying ahead of the heat, and thinking about the possibility that blisters could be a part of your race, which of course you don't want, and figuring out how to deal with that. So I know that during a race for me, and for most runners, 200 to 250 calories is about as much as your body's going to be able to absorb and use during that race. And so I have a couple of go-to basic things that have worked for me for years, and so I stick to it. When I have a crew or I have access to these things, I'll drink half a bottle of Ensure, which I always joke about and call the old lady drink, but that's what I drink. Half an Ensure every hour, and then a gel on the half hour, which is combined is about 220 calories. So, I combine that with a little bit of Coke or Gatorade or some other food item, and I've got all the caloric intake that I need. Now, you do 135 miles like Badwater, you're going to get a little bored with all that. So you mix it up a little bit. There are other things that we do, like, but it's typically something that's either a fluid or easy to get down, like applesauce, for example.
Mm-hmm.
At night, we'll crank up a little jet boil, boil some water, and I'll eat ramen, some noodles, and some broth that really hits the spot. It really is good. So different things, but for me, those basic things work pretty well and keep me rolling. And so that's one aspect of this balancing act. I found for the most part that drinking plain water works best for me. Now, sometimes I'll use Tailwind or another product, but usually it's water supplemented by a product like Salt Stick or Endurolites, which are capsules that are electrolytes. And then on a very regular basis, I'm taking those things in order to keep that balance right, so I don't bonk. I don't wind up with calf cramping and Charlie horsing that knocked me out of one Badwater race and a couple of other times in my running career. So that balance is vital. And then, of course, with Badwater, it's the heat. So you want to wear ice on your body. I wear an ice bandana, which is changed frequently. I'll put ice under my hat. If you can, and the same thing's true with Keys. It's a very hot weather race. So if you can stay ahead of that heat, you're going to probably do fine. But you have to stay ahead of it and stay on plan.
Yeah, that's definitely one of those things you get behind. I mean, I guess you could catch back up, but it's really hard to stay in the race at that point if you got behind especially on electrolytes or anything else. And it's interesting, everything you listed is very easily able to swallow.
Right.
No big chunks of anything, which I've found, anytime I've never done anything that long, but anything that gets longer, my stomach has to be trained to take in the calories while I'm on the go. So I mean, I forget where
Josh,
I was going.
go
ahead.
If I can just add a comment. Now, there are people for whom solid food, real food, is not only vital, but they can get it down and keep it down. I mean, it's just their body works that way. But for the most part, when you're especially in and if it's not a hot weather race, I'll do some of that too. But in a hot weather race, your blood lies mostly your extremities, cooling your body, dealing with the heat. So you don't have a huge amount of it left to work and digest food, work your stomach area and your intestines and digest food. So that's one reason why fluids and gels and those kinds of easily swallowable things work the best in a hot weather race for most people. You have an iron stomach ache, God bless you, man. That's good for you, but I don't. So that's, it's important to get it down, but to keep it down.
Yeah, there's one aspect of that, of knowing through experience what works for you and what doesn't. But what you just described is really the biology of the body that's happening. And that's very helpful to know as well, that you have to go with it rather than fight against what is naturally occurring in your body as it tries to survive the thing that you're doing. Right.
Exactly.
So
Yeah,
very,
and train with what you're going to have out there. So
yeah,
you don't train with one thing and then eat something else when you get out of the race. It's important
yeah,
to get your body used to the idea. So
yeah. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got was don't ever try something for the first time on race day.
there you go. You're
Yeah.
right.
Great. So you've mentioned Badwater a couple times. Let's spend a couple minutes going into this race as as it is. So if you wouldn't mind, for anybody that doesn't know what Badwater 135 is, explain the race setup.
Sure. Badwater 135 is a 135-mile race through Death Valley. It's called Badwater because the race begins at Badwater Basin in Death Valley, which is the lowest point in the Western Hemisphere. It's 282 feet below sea level. The 135-mile point, the end of the race, is at what's called the Whitney Portal. It's on Mount Whitney, which is the highest peak in the lower 48 states. And the portal is where the road ends and the trail begins if you're going to hike up and summit the mountain. The portal is at about 8,350 feet, if I remember correctly. So between Badwater Basin and the Whitney Portal, there are there are really three climbs, two of them to about 5,000 feet. And in the case of the last 13 miles from Lone Pine up to the summit, to the portal, that 13 miles, that elevation gain is about 6,000, 6,500 feet, something like that.
Wow.
So there's a lot of climbing involved as well. The race has been going on for a long, long time. The race is only able to get permits for 100 runners, so it's very limited. It's by invitation only, and you actually have to apply to get in. There's fairly strict qualifications, and then there's a committee that decides among the applicants who's able to be invited and who runs the race. So the race now starts at night. And unless you're an elite, and by the way, you have 48 hours to complete the race. So unless you're an elite who's finishing in 25 or 30 hours or so, the night start means you're actually running through 2 nights, which is a big challenge. So this year, the temperature at the start was 118 degrees, which is pretty moderate at night. What happens out there, we're running on the road, but you're totally surrounded by it's all desert, so it's rock and sand. And the blacktop road itself absorbs all that heat during the day and it radiates it back, but very, very slowly during the course of the night. So when the sun goes down, it doesn't automatically, temperature doesn't drop 20 or 30 degrees automatically at all. So it's hot when you begin. So you running through that first night is not generally too bad. You're generally prepared that you don't have to sleep that first night. Now you get into the day that follows. And it gets very, very hot. And at that point, you've crossed your first 5,000-mile peak. You're down in Panamint Valley, where it's at least as hot as it was when you started the race. This year, in fact, that there was so much heat radiating off the blacktop that I had to put a pair of long pants on to dissipate the heat. It was actually burning my legs. It was really, it's pretty wild. And then you begin climbing up the second 5,000-mile peak, if you will. And now you get into the second night. And during that second night, for me, and I guess for most runners, that's where the fatigue starts setting in and it becomes really hard to stay awake. So, you can go to sleep and, sleep for 4 hours if you want to, or go out and watch a movie, but the clock still ticks. So I wound up this year sleeping 3 times. Well, the first was 50 minutes, and then I had 2 20-minute naps, and I was able to, stay awake into that second full day when I ultimately finished at 45 hours, so I had 3 hours to go. And one of the keys to Badwater is you can't run that race alone. You have to have a support crew of people who leapfrog you down the highway, and you meet them every couple of miles. That particular distance is up to you as the runner and the crew team. But you meet your crew and they replenish your whatever you need. So a fresh bottle of water, ice bandanas that we talked about, electrolytes that we talked about, food and calories, changing into your night gear, changing clothes, changing shoes, socks, whatever it is you need, it's going to be in that vehicle. And your crew's job is to keep you well fed and well watered and keep you on plan. And in my case, I had a best case, worst case scenario in terms of my pacing, when I wanted to be at certain places and how long it was going to take to get there. And keeping me between those two parameters meant I would finish the race within the allowable 48 hours. And my crew included my coach, Lisa, who I talked about earlier, and who knows me better than anyone in terms of running. And they were just incredible in keeping me on track, on pace, and giving me kind of tough love when I needed it, like when I did not want to eat. But as you pointed out earlier, you have to keep those calories coming in all the way to the finish line, or you're going to bonk. You're not going to make it. So I credit my crew, as most runners in that race do, with getting them to the finish line. And I certainly do in my case. So I was really blessed this year with Lisa, with legendary runner Marshall Ulrich, his wife Heather, and a close friend of mine, Will Litwin, who I've run many races with. They were my 4-person crew. And the stars aligned and the crew made it happen. And
Wow.
I was able to get to that finish line and become the oldest finisher of Badwater in race history, and which was my goal.
That's a legendary team for sure, with the names you just mentioned.
Bet.
Did you know going into it that finishing you would be the oldest on record to do it?
Yes, and that was my goal. So if I can give you a little history,
Yep.
in 2010, the former record was set by a Brit, Jack Dennis, who'd run that race many, many times. He was 75, and that was the last year that you had 60 hours to complete the race. After that, it was reduced to 48. So Jack finished in 59 hours and 13 minutes. And I just felt that having been, well, let me back up. I've actually been at Badwater running the race. This was my 6th time running it, or as a support crew member, or as race staff for 18 years in a row. So I know the race very well, the course very well. And when I was approaching 75, I thought, maybe I have a shot at breaking that record. So it was actually when I was 76 in 2021, I gave it my first shot. I got in the race. That's when I screwed up and did not properly balance electrolytes. When I got to mile 44, cramping and severe Charlie horsing, like scream out loud Charlie horsing kicked in. And by the time I recovered, I missed the first cutoff, which was at 50 miles. And I had to drop out of the race, which was, of course, extremely frustrating. I should have known better, but these things happen. The next year, 2022, which was 3 years ago, I get in again trying to break that record. And everything was going great until about mile 100, when my back gave out. And I wound up leaning forward increasingly to the point where, as we were approaching Lone Pine at the base of Mount Whitney, I was literally bent over in half. I was staring at the ground as I was moving forward. It was very difficult. It wasn't painful, but I couldn't stand up. And it obviously really slowed me down. And as we began climbing up the mountain, up that 13-mile climb, my legs became more and more dysfunctional. And as we were within a couple of miles of the finish line, they would hardly move. And it reached a point where I was able to do 15 or 20 steps and would have to stop, gather myself, and then do a few more. And meanwhile, the clock is winding down. Within about a mile from the finish line, the legs weren't working. And at that point, the race medical director was walking alongside me to keep an eye on me. And I was totally lucid. I mean, I was fine, but she was keeping a close eye on me, which was really a great thing. And I said to her at one point, these legs aren't working right now. Can I break up the muscle movement by maybe doing a bear crawl for a while on all fours? And she said, well, there's no rule against that. I mean, that she knows of. You have to get to the finish line under your own power. So that's what I did. I started mixing bear crawling with walking, very short distances at a time. And eventually I made the finish line, but I was 17 minutes and 27 seconds over 48-hour cutoff. So it was an unofficial finish. So here we are 3 years ago. I'd done it, tried it twice now. And I said, okay, I mean, that it ain't happening. And that was that. But over the next couple of years, it was always in the back of my mind. And last November, I ran a race in Arizona called Route 66 Ultra, which is actually Marshall and Heather Ulrich's race. It's a 140 miler, and it was the longest one I'd done in a while. And I did well. And I thought, let me give this some real thought. So I talked to Lisa about it, and we decided, all right, if I can get in, let's do this one more time, but let's get really smart about it. And Lisa committed to being my crew chief if I could get into the race. And of course, she would train me as she always does. And so, yeah, so that's kind of what happened. I decided, all right, one more time. And, I was 5 years older than Jack, and I had to beat his time by 12 hours because I only had 48. So, and like I said, it just worked this time. And once I committed and got in, I never had a moment where I didn't think I was going to finish. I really was absolutely confident I would get there. And it partly because I had complete confidence in my crew. That was a big part of it.
What happened to your back in 2022? What specifically, was it a disc issue or?
It was a muscle issue. Now I have some back issues. I've got some, some disc issues, and I've got some arthritis, and so I will have some back issues no matter what I do. Even this year I did, but I didn't have that sort of collapse, if you will, where I just didn't have the whatever it was, the core strength or whatever to remain erect. And this year, I was leaning a little bit this year too, but nothing like what happened 3 years ago. And I'm just glad it wasn't 140 miles. 135 was enough.
Well, so for anybody that hasn't seen it, Outside Magazine on their Instagram page has a video of you in those final miles of bent over and then bear crawling, and then making it across the line with a Modelo waiting on you on the other side. But it's wild to see that you put yourself to such an extreme point that your body got to the point of saying, this is the best I can do. And you're literally hand and foot crawling on the asphalt. But I loved seeing that not only you didn't let it stop you kept going and finished, forget whether it was official or not. And what I'm really curious about is, through all these experiences, some successful, quote unquote, and some unsuccessful, what have you learned most about yourself in doing these races?
Well, a couple of things. I guess first, it just reinforces how competitive I've always been. And it's not always competition with somebody else. A race like this, a lot of it's competition with yourself, right? Absolutely. I mean, if I was an elite runner trying to win Badwater, that would be a competition with other people. But really, this is just competition with myself and with the event itself, with the challenge of the event. And, it's trying to be the best you can be, whether it's beating somebody or just reaching a goal. And I don't like the idea of not finishing. DNFs are terrible. You always think about it the next day and say to yourself, my God, if I'd only done this differently or that differently, I could have finished. And, the finish line is glorious when you cross it. I always tell first time runners running my races, you get to cross that finish line, those are bragging rights, baby, and those are bragging rights forever. So if you're in the middle of a race and you're really feeling bad and you're having a down spot, which everyone does, don't give up. Give yourself, if you have time, and generally in these races, you have time, take a half an hour, take an hour, gather yourself, get some food, get some water, put your feet up, and you may very well find that, you're feeling a little better. Maybe I'll give it another shot. And you get out there and you finish the race. I've seen it time and time again. And basically, I applied that same principle to myself. There were a lot of people up there waiting for me to come in and cheering me on and playing some of my favorite music. And, mostly I wanted to finish for myself, but I wanted to finish it for them as well. And the fact that it was over the limit, well, that was really unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Yeah, referring to 2022, that race. Yeah,
that's right. It was 2022. And as I said, I may or not have said before, you don't know what's around that next curve. I don't know it all, and I'm curious about. I want to keep an open mind about what's around that curve, because there's growth ahead. There's just this is maybe a silly example of it, but I wanted to see if I could get to that finish line, especially given the condition I was in. And it was strange because when I was doing that bear crawl, all I could think of was my old trainer, a guy I used to train with for years, for whom form was everything. And I could imagine myself, if Jeff had been there giving me hell because my form on that bear crawl was horrible, they'd be, get your ass down, your form is terrible. That's what was going through my head. So, it's crazy what the mind can do.
Yeah. So this past year that you did, I mean, I guess this was what, a month ago that
Yeah, 2 months ago. July
Ago.
7th through 9th is where the
Okay.
race day. So 2 months.
Yeah. Yeah. So not only is the Badwater
Excuse me.
extremely difficult, it's in July running through Death Valley. So, even more extreme. But what was in this particular race, what was the low point for you?
Wow, good question. Well, there were probably two answers. One is I started up the Portal Road at the end, and my back started bothering me a little bit. I thought to myself, "Oh no, not this again."
Oh,
Now
really?
it never got to the point of no return, but that was a low point in terms of being concerned about being able to
Mhm.
finish. Even then, I didn't think I wouldn't, but there was that concern. And the other was before I got that first 50-minute nap at they call Father Crowley Point. This was all prearranged. That's at about, I don't know, 78 miles or so, maybe 80 miles into the race. I was really tired and needed that sleep. And that was kind of a low point because I just, it was one of those things where I couldn't wait to get into that van, sit down in that seat for 50 minutes and take a nap. So those were probably the two low points. Otherwise, it was all pretty good.
When you hit those points of either exhaustion or even nutrition is lacking or hydration is lacking, do you get grumpy? What is the result of that, and how do you come out of it? So I'm thinking in terms of, do you have some people have a mantra, some people have a thing that they think about that gets them removed from the experience. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, when you have a crew, a race where you have a crew supporting you and you see them frequently, that is tremendously helpful. And one of their big jobs is to keep you motivated and positive and talking you out of any negativity that you may be, spouting. And also keeping you on track with things like electrolytes. So when you get real tired out there, and let's say, for example, you're on a schedule where you're taking electrolytes in every half an hour. There've been many times in my running career where the crew has said, "Okay, time for electrolytes," and they said, "No way! I just had those 5 minutes ago," and it wasn't. It was half an hour ago. So
Okay.
your crew is really vital. But in a race where you don't have a crew, and it's even tougher, I don't have a mantra per se, but I always try to remind myself that I chose to be out there.
Right.
And I'm not here because somebody made me come out here. I came out here because I wanted to. And why did I want to? Because I wanted to finish this race.
Mhm.
I wanted to have that notch in my belt. And so I do my best at that point to reinforce that and try to overcome that negative, which is most typically for most people. All right, I'm done. My body can't handle any more of this. And I
Yeah.
do take stock and I say, okay, if my body's really pushing back, is the problem something that's going to cause permanent injury or something serious? Or is this just discomfort or blisters or a muscle thing that just take me a few days to recover? And if I do drop right now, how am I going to feel a week from now when I think back and say, damn it, I should not have dropped. I could have finished this thing.
Yeah.
So by talking that through with myself, I'm typically able to keep going.
I've seen people do one of two things. It's either what's the word? A removal, like a mental removal from the situation. So I'm running this race, but I'm thinking about this other thing that is completely different, and so I'm disassociating with the current pain. And then the other option, and I think this is what you described, is you're doubling down on the experience itself and staying in that moment and using that as a way to process through the struggle, the suffer. And I think the way you said it just now is, what's it going to feel like when I finish, or if I drop out of this and didn't finish. Right. So has that always been your go-to, to double down on staying in the experience and working your way through it?
Yeah, it really has. And like you pointed out, it's not for everybody, but people ask me all the time, what are you thinking about out there when you're out there for 40 hours or whatever it is? And my response is, I'm really not creating the next great American novel in my head. I'm in the moment, and I'm focused on that next footfall. And for the most part, thinking about short chunks. And again, this isn't unique by any stretch either. All right, I'm just focused on getting to the next aid station, or the next time I meet my crew, or a particular landmark. Let's say in the case of Badwater, a particular landmark. And I know if I'm going to get to that point, and then I'll think about the next one. So I'm not thinking about 135 miles. I'm thinking about, 5 miles or 10 miles or 18 miles,
Yeah.
and do a piece at a time, and it'll all come together. So again, nothing unique, but that's how it works for me, not for everybody.
Yeah. Have you ever done, Lisa's done, I think, the double and the quad. Marshall did the quad with Badwater several times. Have you done anything with them to that extent?
Yeah, I did the Badwater double when I was 70, which is
Wow.
in this case, it was doing the race and then summiting Mount Whitney to the top and turning around, going back to Badwater Basin. So
Oh, wow.
that's 292 miles. And as far as I know, I'm the oldest person to ever do that. But no, but you'll get a kick out of this. Now, doing the quad that's going out and back and then out and back, which is pretty out there, right? Not many people have done it. Very, very
Right.
few. Marshall's, I think, the first, and Lisa's done it as well. And around the time Lisa did that a number of years ago, a mutual friend of ours heard about it and said to me, "You know what? I think if she can do the quad, I'm going to do the ocho." So I'm going to go out and back 8 times. I mean, it gets totally absurd at some level, but yeah.
Did they do it? Did they do it 8 times?
No. He was he was just pulling my chain. But
Yeah.
but you think about how crazy that is. But there is always another crazy, and I don't, and I suppose insanity is a certain prerequisite to do ultras. But a lot of people will, just create things like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, Lisa once decided she wanted to try running from Las Vegas to the summit of Whitney, and she did. When she turned 50, she ran 50 miles in 50 states in something like 53 or 54 days. And the only reason it took that long was transportation issues.
Hmm.
I mean, people have done all kinds of things, and I'm not that original, but there are some legends like those two who have done some really amazing things.
Well, you still fit in this category in my mind of where human beings have done things that are in the 0.1% of what human beings have done, and you've extended and extended and extended beyond what maybe you thought or what most people would think is a preconceived limit. What I guess the question really is, are there really limits to, obviously physically there are, this is not a ridiculous statement, but is there the ability to continue to stretch for the human being to continue to do more and more and more to where it's really just about creativity rather than whether it's doable or not?
I think so. I think within reason, yes. And you can look at the effort to break 2 hours in a marathon.
Mhm.
I don't think it's been done. It's been very, very, very close, but it'll happen. But you reach a certain point and things like that where the incremental improvement is going to be really, really small. But then, hey, that would, before the 4-minute mile was cracked, that was an impossible as well. So you're certainly familiar with Lazarus Lake and his Big's
Mhm.
Backyard Ultra. And, at one point in that series, in that event, the almost unattainable goal was 300 miles. Harvey Lewis did 450 miles a couple of years ago. So you never really know.
Mhm.
I've broken a couple of records in my age range, and mine will be broken as well. So yes, I think there's almost no limit to what can happen, but you reach semi ceilings, if you will, where the next steps are going to be, I think, incremental. And otherwise, it's just creating new challenges and new kinds of events. Mentioned Ken
Mhm.
Posner a little while ago.
Yeah.
He's bagging all those mountain peaks barefoot.
Mhm.
I mean, who does that? Well, that's a new thing, a different kind of thing. When Laz recreated that backyard ultra concept, I mean, that was unheard of. So there's still new things to create, new things to discover out there, and
Mhm.
bring them on. Let's see what's next.
Yeah. Yeah. I mentioned Pete Ripmaster earlier, the Iditarod 1000
Right.
winner. He's doing something very similar to that backyard ultra idea where he's pretty much said he won't do any races again. They just don't interest him anymore. But what he's doing is he's creating his own ultra in every state, and he's hitting all 50 states, and he's raising money for a charity that's important to him to do it. But it's, giving him something to focus on but create the challenge, right? It takes the creativity of coming up with the race in a different state. That almost, the more I have these conversations, that's the limits of our creativity seem to be the limits of what we're achieving. And I say we collectively, I'm certainly not doing these things, but like you said, the incremental small differences that get added and added and added, and then all of a sudden people are doing 450 miles at a time.
Right. Well, if I may, I totally agree. And in fact, one-off adventures, which is the sort of thing he's doing or thinking about doing, are to me even more appealing than races as I get as I get older. So I have a good friend, David Green, who in fact about 2 weeks ago just finished running across Europe solo from Porto,
Wow.
Portugal to Istanbul, right? He has also run across the United States. And David has organized a group of us, a group of friends who have run on the Camino de Santiago in Spain and in Portugal as a one-off adventure. We'll, over a few days, we'll do about a 50K a day and total of 150 miles or so, and run during the day. There's no clock. It's not a race. Stop for lunch, have a cold one if you want to, and take photos along the way. And at the end of the day, we meet at a prearranged hotel, bodega kind of thing, drink too much wine, eat too much food, and get up the next day and do it again. That is a lot of fun. And you know, pick your location, pick your adventure. And that's been really very, very exciting. So yeah, what he's doing makes total sense. That sure, why not create something new? All these fastest known time things that people have been doing, same idea. You know.
Yeah, the Camino race or adventure, is that something you were saying you've done, or you're getting ready to?
Last year we did a portion of it from France into Spain. It was about 150 miles all in. And the year before we were in Portugal and ran from Porto to Santiago de Compostela, which is where the cathedral is. That's what what that pilgrimage route is named after.
Yeah.
And the goal of the pilgrimage goal. And there's a similar one in Brazil, the Camino de Fé, same idea.
Okay.
There is a 135-mile race in Brazil in those mountains called Brazil 135, which is kind of in the middle of the Camino de Fé, which is, I don't know, 500 or 600 miles now. It tends to extend. David has done that multiple times where he's started at the beginning, run to the start of the Brazil 135, run the race, and then continued on to the end of the Camino. So, you know, how creative can you get? Those are some examples.
Well, that's all of this is so inspiring to me to take what base I have now and build on it. Keep going. At 80 years old, what I'm really curious of is what do you see yourself continuing to stretch for, and what is the thing that, whether we call it legacy or the thing you want the next generation that's coming up and doing the things that you've spent the last 20 years doing, what is the one thing that you would pass down to that generation?
Well, that well, there really are very few limits, and certainly age is not a limiting factor. It doesn't have to be. Again, you have to be sensible about the event that you're doing. It's got to be age appropriate. But for the most part, if somebody else can do it, you can too. And ultramarathoning isn't for everyone, and it doesn't have to be for you. But in the ideal, find something that keeps your body moving, and you'll keep doing it throughout your life. It really will impact your health. It, for me at least, is it's very joyful and is very fulfilling. I'm very pleased that as a result of having been a race director and having brought so many people into the sport, and because of my age, inspiring a few people, I suppose those are the things I leave behind. That you know, we've added to the wealth a little bit. Beyond that, you know, records come and records go, and that's all fun, and my kids love it. But you know, that's not the important thing.
What the first question there that I kind of buried in the longer question, what do you see yourself still continuing to stretch for? Do you have anything that is on the list to shoot for? I
don't right now. I'm not going to run Badwater again. I mean, I'll go back and volunteer as I have for years. But you know, I set a world record 2 years ago in the 48-hour fixed time category, and that there are a couple of other race categories where I might have a shot in breaking a record. I don't know whether I'm going to want to do that or not. I'll continue to do some racing. Probably the next one will be in early January. Nothing too extreme, but I'm more and more enamored of the idea of doing these one-off adventures with David and the group, or just with others. To me, I can do those for a long, long time to come, because there's no clock, and they can be as age appropriate as they need to be. So yeah, I would hope to continue to keep moving as long as my body allows me to do that, and hopefully keep at it for a long time.
Is it the camaraderie that you get out of the group adventures, or where does that weigh against the adventure itself?
A major part of it is that, and the other is I'm doing things in places where I otherwise probably never would have gone.
Yeah.
I mean, I think back, I mentioned Marathon des Sables, but there's another stage race here in the States that's very similar. It's called, yeah, my mind just went, oh my gosh. I'll remember that. It starts at the north rim of the Grand Canyon and continues out into the desert, out into Utah, past a number of the state and national parks, and it ends at the Grand Staircase in the Escalante area.
Wow.
Doing that on foot is unbelievably spectacular.
I'm
a place
sure
that I would just never otherwise have gone. And it's true for many of the races that I've done. I raced in probably my most memorable and emotionally connected race was in the southwest China province of Yunnan, near the Myanmar border, in the mountains. I would never have gone to that area of the world, probably not even to China, had it not been for that opportunity to race in that beautiful place.
Wow.
So there are a lot of examples of where, yes, camaraderie and being with your buddies is very much a part of it, but the notion of being places and experiencing things that are very unique is an additional, very big part of it.
Yeah, that's a cool combination. And I think a good way to put a bow on our conversation, and just kind of really ties all of this together that we've been talking about, all the things that you've done and accomplished, but the inspiration that you've had of getting more and more people into these long distance races, and the why, the reason for doing this, what drives you. And I think the folks that I've known that do these races, what brings people back over and over again, it's sometimes hard to put a finger on, but it's a combination of all of it. And this has been really, Bob, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. Obviously, Badwater being fresh in the last 2 months, and the record there is huge and super fun to talk about. But I love digging into these conversations of that kind of part psychology, part adventure, of what really drives us to do these things that at first seem a little bit bonkers, and then you do it, and then you do it over and over and over again. And so you've done a great job of explaining that. I appreciate you doing that.
Well, thank you very, very much. And, I've been doing a lot of speaking, and I want to do a lot more of that and kind of share the story. And it's always fun to talk to people in this, in this kind of a venue, and with you, Josh. Great questions. I appreciate the chance to share my story a little bit. Thank you very much for having me.
Great. So where can people most easily find you if they want to find one of your races or anything about you online?
Probably the best thing is my races all have websites. keys100.com, Daytona100ultra.com. But just send me an email. I'll respond. It's bob@ultrasportsllc.com. Bob@ultrasportsllc. Just email me anytime. That's probably the best way to reach me.
That's great. All right. Very good. Thanks again, Bob. And we'll do this again at some point. You said you're not doing Badwater again, but whatever the next thing that you accomplish as the oldest person to complete it, we'll have another conversation.
Look forward to it, Josh.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Great.
Take care. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the On Adventure podcast. Be on the lookout for another episode dropping in a couple weeks. And be sure to go to our YouTube page and subscribe and follow us there, as well as on all the socials from Facebook to Instagram and LinkedIn. Until our next episode, I hope you stay safe and stay on adventure.